Welcome, everyone. Okay, so this is Lockdown Learning Live. Again, my name is Lee. We're also going to be joined by Phil today. Say hi, Phil. Hi, Phil.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And so today, like we discussed last week, I almost said yesterday, we're going to be talking about drag. So let's get rolling. Already having technical difficulties.
Lee, how's it going?
I don't know if the intro played.
Yeah, no, the intro played. It looked great.
Okay.
It sounded great. And it was complete with,
Sweet.
no, it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of weirdness with the application for some reason. Anyways, let's hope that it doesn't continue. Totally. So I'm going to need a lot of your help today, Phil, since I'm having all these weirdnesses. So you're going to have to tell me if everything's looking right.
Okay.
So here I have a children's depiction of parasite drag. Some child scribbled on my screen. Is that what you're seeing?
I am seeing child penmanship. I am, yes.
Okay. And there's also a toy involved,
either a child or an adult that tried really hard.
Yeah, all right, cool. So today we're talking about drag. In particular, we're going to talk about parasite drag. So there's a few types of drag. We're going to keep it a little specific today just to shorten up our lesson here. Under parasite drag, there are three different types: form, interference, and skin friction. So we'll talk about each of these in detail, and we'll be hopping back and forth between me and Phil. Phil, feel free to jump in and ask any questions anytime you want to say something, or you think I'm wrong and you want to point it out. Feel free.
Sure.
While we're discussing these types of drag, we wanted to use a little example to make it a little bit more fun. So like we used before, the Star Wars theme, we'll be talking the Millennium Falcon. And it's a really, really good example for all these types of drag because it's a really weird shape. And it's got an example of all of these in them. So let's get rolling. Form drag is essentially the shape of the object, right? So the shape of the object determines the amount of form drag we're going to have. So I'm zooming in here on our Millennium Falcon. As you can see, it's got a lot of different shapes. So, and let's hope that Lee's pen is going to work.
It looks good so far, man. And that's a really good picture too. It looks like a really, really great example of. There's a lot of little, like, you know, looks like piping, and you got that radar dish and like the cockpit and a lot of things hanging off of it. It looks like a really good example of something that's gonna get in the way of that airflow for sure.
Yep. So here I'm kind of scribbling on the screen. There is this kind of like a triangular trapezoidal section, right? So we'll talk a little about geometry, right? There's this dish, which is a circle. So we can talk about that being a circle. And then we'll talk a lot about the cockpit over here. cockpit has some really interesting sections. It's got a really interesting shape. So when we're talking about form drag, we're really caring about the actual shape of the object, right? And when we talked about last week or the week before, I can't remember, we talked about these streamlines, right? So if something is streamlined, then that means that it's kind of shapely for airflow to pass over it efficiently, right? So a shape like the trapezoidal is actually a decent shape for airflow to pass over it versus a circle like the satellite dish is kind of crummy for airflow to pass over it because it kind of runs into it, right? So when we're talking about form drag, we're talking more about is the shape in a way that allows the airflow to efficiently pass over it. Phil, did you have any real world examples of this? Because I know this thing's flying through space, which is kind of abstract. Did you have any real world examples of this?
Yeah, most definitely. So, like, yeah, if you could hand it over to my screen.
Sure. Just give me a second
No
to
problem.
fumble around with my computer.
Because yeah, you make a great point that with that we were making last time with ships flying. You can see my screen, okay?
Yeah, you're all good.
Yeah. So Lee made a really great point. We're flying. We've got to make the distinction. We're flying through an atmosphere, through the air, and we're talking about the different ways that these objects, like the different effects, the drag effects that these objects flying through air have. And so what I wanted to point you to were some concrete examples of where we might find form drag in aviation, and to kind of map onto the fictitiousness like of the Millennium Falcon, and kind of help us understand the form drag of the ship in a more interesting way. First way would be like we said, it's the shape of something going through the air. So I got this example of a bullet right here. It was a really nice example of something that is going to agree with a lot of air hitting it very in very, very quickly. It's going to be, obviously it's a bullet, so it's going to be moving through the air really quickly. But if it wasn't shaped like this, there'd be no telling like where this thing would tumble around to, and it would veer off course. But when it's shaped like this, when it's shaped obviously going through the air this side first, and just very smoothly allowing that airflow over the surface of it, it does it flies true in the way that it needs to fly. So let's look at a couple examples in aviation where we would find the form of the object actually playing a huge part in its efficiency to go through the air and reducing that drag. First example I have here is the F-18. It's a beautiful looking airplane, and here again we see a couple things. First of all, dude's got his afterburner on, so this thing is hauling. So it's hauling butt, and you could also tell by this shockwave cloud that's trailing behind the plane. So it's super important that a plane like this that can go faster than the speed of sound be extremely streamlined and reducing that form drag by being bullet shaped. You can see here, basically, it's got a nose that's in the shape of a bullet. The thing's ready to go real fast through the air. You compare that with the Stearman, with this, very broad radial engine front right here, very broad leading edges of the wings. It is obviously it's almost like the other end of this bullet. It's almost like if you tried to shoot the bullet out this side first, But then again, the Stearman is not designed to go, 800 knots. So I think that where we have the question of efficiency and reducing form drag, also the aircraft design and performance comes into play as well. So kind of some interesting relationship there. Thoughts from you, Lee, on shape?
Sure, yeah. Let's pop over back to my screen for a second, and we'll talk about a really applicable shape. And we've seen this shape before, but I decided to get a little drawn on and draw me a little wing here. Okay, this is a wing, believe it or not.
Sorry, I was going to say, there's no way that whoever drew this wrote that text from earlier. There's no way.
Yeah, it's a different person. This is an artist who drew this, and then the earlier one was an artist's kid. Yeah, that came in and collaborative effort. All right. So
Yeah, teamwork.
here we go. This shape that my mouse is kind of tracing here, that's the airfoil shape that we are so familiar with as aviators. And this is basically a simplified wing so that you guys can see one of the most applicable the form drags that we get. So you can see over on the top of the wing here, we have basically a smooth line coming over this surface. And then on the bottom, I have drew little circles. I mean, the artist drew little circles, and those represent rivets or just like something on the skin of the aircraft. And we haven't talked about rivets yet, so don't worry too much about it. Basically just like a raised portion, a disruption in the force. So here's what the line would look like as it crossed over here. And you can see obviously that as the airflow hits a bump, it's going to create some sort of disruption. And that disruption is what is creating that form drag. So that's the obvious kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? So the other types of drag that we're going to talk about are a little bit less intuitive, in my opinion, than form drag, because form drag just straight up makes sense, right? It runs into something and then it's got to move. And if it has to move, it's going to create a disruption in our lift, or basically hold us back a little bit. And we'll talk about how the forces interact with each other in a later video. The next one we're going to talk about is interference drag. So interference drag has to do with airflow running into each other, interferes with each other. So if we come look in the cockpit area here of our Millennium Falcon, we can see conceptually what's going to happen here when a streamline comes and is going to interact with this surface. It has to choose where to go. And I'm going to just take a streamline and say that it has to cross over this direction and go over here. So it has to divert around this object, this cockpit, for example. Also, there's air crossing through here and going over this surface. And as you can see, obviously, these two lines intersect, right? They interfere with each other. So that's what interference drag is. And if any airflow runs into each other, I mean, you can think about it as little molecules. I hope everyone can see my little red dots in space over here.
Yeah, it looks great.
Air can interact with each other, and the molecules will, they'll bounce off of each other. I know this is highly conceptual, but this is actually what occurs in air. The molecules actually get excited and can run into each other. So whenever you have some kind of intersection of flow, you can have these kind of molecules that get all crazy. And of course, that's not what we want. We want smooth, happy flow. So this is unhappy flow right here, obviously depicted by that airflow. You can see that airflow over there. So this is essentially what's happening in our Millennium Falcon. Is there's a lot of interference drag. I mean, look at the whole structure. I mean, it just, man, it's like not made to fly. Anyways, Phil, did you have any real world stuff going on with this? Because again, I keep getting geeked out in the Star Wars stuff, and we have to talk about airplanes.
It's hard not to, and I'm right there with you, man. So hand it over to me, and let's take them through it. So yeah, Lee made a really great point that like we know that as the Sling Falcon's flying through the atmosphere on different planets, it's going to have airflow that is going to be hitting these crevices, and it's going to be flows from different directions will be interfering with each other and causing a lot of turbulence, and will ultimately like hold the craft back. And parasite drag or interference drag is the type of parasite drag that we see in airplanes. And the way that we characterize it is it's the type of drag that we see occurring on the airplane surface where the lifting surfaces meet the body of the airplane. That's what we typically think of as defining the where the interference drag is occurring. It's the drag where the airflow it's the airflow interfering with each other, airflow streams interfering with each other where the wings meet the body. So So what we're
Let
going
me
to
interrupt you, Phil, because we've got a comment here, and I want to address this. Do you see this comment?
let me see here. I do not. Let's see here. Maybe the live comments. Oh yeah, exactly.
We've got somebody saying that the Millennium Falcon doesn't fly in the atmosphere. Now, is that true?
No,
Does the Millennium Falcon?
I don't know. I seem to recall several scenes in the classic Star Wars where the Millennium Falcon was based, and like for example, where the rebels were flying their ships out of and followed them out. Millennium Falcon definitely has flown through. I mean, think about it. Like Han Solo when he was on planets, like doing all his uh, um, um, like backdoorsy type of shipments and stuff like that. Like he had to be landing on planets and in order to like pick up illegal packages and all kinds of stuff. It wasn't a space specifically a ship.
I agree. Okay, so we can move on.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
All right, let's get back to real airplanes.
Yeah. So if interference drag is the drag that results from conflicting airflows where the wings meet the body of the airplane, it's very important that we minimize that. And again, whether it's form drag or induced drag or any other kind of drag, what we're trying to do is increase the efficiency of the airplane and reduce the amount of drag in order to help this plane fly further for at less energy cost. And so anything we can do to eliminate drag, especially this type of drag, the better. The way that we make the planes efficient here, as you can see with the Sling image, is we add fairings. We make things, we allow these wings to join the body of the airplane in ways that aren't so like so starkly opposed. We make these edges, the wing root rounded. We have this trailing edge fairing that we check in the pre-flight that is a nice taper, that is a nice flowing taper that reduces that turbulence occurring at the wing root right there. We've got the dorsal fin that we check in pre-flight that, instead of having a vertical stabilizer that just meets the fuselage and then that's it. No, like we try and reduce that that turbulent flow or that turbulent air hitting the body of the airplane near the stabilizer. We try and make that as streamlined as possible. And we see some other examples of fairings that help airflow as well. But I think the viewers get the idea. Here, this is a great example right here, actually, of the wing root. You got a nice fairing right there that just makes that wing root connection nice and smooth. So instead of air collecting right where the body meets and it's all rolling, tumbling, bubbling air, it's going to try and stay as streamlined like you were saying.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Fairings. Check your fairings pre-flight. Make sure they're on. Make sure they're not cracked. Fairings are your friends.
Fairings are your friends. If you take nothing else away from this,
fairings
are friends, not friends.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, that's a T-shirt waiting to happen for sure.
All right, we got this last one to deal with here. Skin friction, and I don't have any cool pictures to share with you. I'm sure Phil does. We'll come over to our Millennium Falcon just for a bit. There's not much to talk about in terms of skin friction drag on this particular ship because it has to do with the actual material that we're dealing with. So if you can see here, pretty much I've zoomed in really far. This is what we're going to do when we talk about skin friction, is we're going to zoom in really far on materials and try to figure out, why the different type of material would basically produce more drag. As you can see, most of this aircraft, as I'm scrolling around, moving around it, it's pretty much all metal. And many aircraft today are also metal, and painted metal essentially. But we also have fabric aircraft, like the Stearman is a fabric aircraft. So that would actually have a different drag associated with it because the material is different. So before we hop over to Phil and talk about this a little bit more in depth, I want to make sure that we have a distinction here between the form and the skin friction drag, because it's easy to think that these rivets would be skin friction drag because you think that they're part of the skin. So the actual disruption that's being caused by these rivets would be skin friction drag, when in fact, this is a form. This is an object that's deflecting the flow, whereas a skin friction drag would be more like if your flaps were fabric where your wing surface was actually aluminum, then that would change the drag associated with that surface because the actual surface material is different. So let's get this guy pulled off the screen here.
Well, Lee, I just had a quick question because you mentioned metal, like, and we deal a lot with metal and like aluminum, especially in aircraft. And I mean, I know like when I was first learning about this type of drag and going through as a student pilot, and I've even had students that I've worked with say the same thing, the metal feels smooth. So what is it about the metal that, like, would you advise students like kind of to the the untrained eye and the unseeing eye, somebody who's feeling like smooth metal may be inclined to think that there is no skin friction issue or any issue with the way that aluminum was manufactured. So maybe can you speak to that and what, even running your fingers along like a seemingly smooth Millennium Falcon surface, what is it about metal that, would result in skin friction and that can we not detect that, or like, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So I have a couple examples on that. It has to do with getting really, really close up on the material and seeing really, really closely what's actually on the surface, because we have a very magnified view, a very big picture view of what the surface looks and feels like, but we don't really look at it microscopically. But there is a way for us to understand this in a simple way, actually. If you think about like a rough piece of wood versus a smooth piece of wood, it's the same material, but there's some sort of extra pieces on it. And I can go even further. Like I have some pillows here. I'm in my bed. So here's my pillowcase. My pillowcase, okay, I think my pillowcase is nice and smooth. I like my smooth pillowcase on my face. That's nice, right? And then I also have like a blanket here, right? And if I get this blanket a little bit closer to the mic, you can see it's got kind of these little feathery things. So you can feel different types of fabric, and you can tell that some are more smooth than the other, even macroscopically, big picture macro. But if we get small, really small, microscopically on surfaces like aluminum, you can even see that it's not as smooth as we perceive it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. A couple different points. I think number one, if you threw that blanket over your shoulders, I'd be getting a total Game of Thrones vibe from you. Number one, and number two would be like going back to your pillow, which is a good thing, by the way. It was a great show. The other thing going back to the pillow would be like the interesting thing about the pillowcase. So like the pillow under the pillowcase is. It tends to be a little rougher. Like it's like just the raw, like the pillow, it's just like the cushiony thing. But what's cool about the pillowcase is that it actually it redefines the actual surface of the pillow, and it actually reduces that amount of yeah, exactly, dude. So you're actually fundamentally changing the surface. It's more comfortable to sleep on. Like things are not going to get like caught on it because it's smoother. So but yet. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about the altering of the surface, even on a pillow is, it's imperfect. It's got little like defects in it, and a surface that can definitely be modified a little bit better. So interesting to think about the pillow versus the pillowcase.
Yeah, we could. We're gonna enter the twilight zone if I share your screen. By the way, did you have anything to share with us on skin friction?
Yeah, you can go ahead and share it.
All right, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, if we think about the pillowcase and the pillow, I like to think about like painting the wing, right? Because we always paint our aluminum. So if you put paint over it too, that would also change the surface a little bit and would affect that skin friction drag.
Yeah, or you hear about like waxing, like you'll hear about pilots that need to wash after they wash their airplane. Like the worst thing you could do is, it's kind of weird to think about, but like, one of the worst things you could do is wash your plane. It's like, well, what do you mean? I want to take care of my plane, and but what you're doing is by washing the airplane, you're rinsing out all of the dirt and the things that were actually occupying space in the imperfections in the metal surface. And so what you want to do is, like, you'll hear about waxing an airplane is the right thing to do after you wash it, and the reason why you wax it is to fill in those gaps. So what gaps are we talking about? So here I have a picture of what looks like maybe a tree or a log of some kind or whatever, and it's not. It's a picture of a human hair. And, you figure this is extremely magnified scanning electron microscopic picture, but what you're looking at here is, imagine your hair, your super soft hair that seems like it's totally perfect and very like, shampoo commercial worthy softness. But this is actually what it looks like. Deep down at the surface, you're seeing all these ridges and, places where it look at all like this, these pieces that just jut out. You've got, so imagine something this big flying through the air. I mean, there'd be like no way. You would think, yeah, we got to like take some sandpaper to it and soften that up. The problem is our tools, they stop. You can only get down so far and make materials so perfect before you can't get any smaller. So we're reaching the end of our limitations from a manufacturing standpoint when we talk about that. So just as an example, this is the scale that we're going to be looking at the next picture, this being a human hair, so we can see defects and small ridges like this in actual a metallic surface. This is a picture. I'm actually not sure exactly what this is. It looks like it could be a nail. It could be even just like a metal shard. I'm not really sure, but I picked this picture because it's got some nice contrast, and it's a great exemplification or example of what we mean by like surface defects and imperfections that are also on the seemingly smooth aluminum of your aircraft. So here we see some truly smooth surface, on whatever this metal object happens to be. It's super smooth right here, but in here, whether that was due to like twisting forces or something brushed up against it and actually scratched it, that was also metal, maybe it looked like. The way that something breaks or snaps, this could be a cable, like a thread of a cable, of a braided cable, maybe. And what you see here is, and Lee, like, feel free to jump in too with your expertise, but you see ridges and valleys and all kinds of places where air molecules can get in and cause turbulence. When the air gets in there, it's not going to flow like it's smoothly like it's going to here. Once the air gets in here, it's gonna be all tumbling and turbulent, and it's gonna ultimately when you're talking about a very small section of the airplane, you're talking about a full wing, a full body of the airplane full of this type of imperfections. It adds up. It really adds up, and that's the space that you're trying to fill with the wax. So any comments, Lee, about surface defects? I mean, obviously that we can do in a couple minutes, so surely you can, but any other comments that you want to make on what we're looking at here on the human hair?
Yeah, sure. So this friction idea, and if you don't understand friction, we can think about it kind of like if you were maybe driving your car on a wet day and you lost control because you went over like a really big pool of water, and there was essentially what happens is there's a a gap between your tire and the ground, and that's water. And water really, really reduces the friction, so you slide, right? So you actually slide like ice skaters slide across the ice. So what we're wanting to do in airplanes is make the air slide across the surface. And to make the air slide across the surface better, it has to be as smooth as possible. And when we really break it down and get really microscopic, which what we're doing here, excuse me, you can see that everything has imperfections. Even my beautiful skin has imperfections.
What?
But yes, when we get down to it and get really, really small, everything has imperfections, and any extra imperfections is what's going to create the friction. And friction, if you think about it in terms of an ice skater going across an ice rink versus you sliding across the concrete, you sliding across the concrete is not going to work too well. You're going to get pretty beat up sliding across the concrete. The ice skater is going to glide. You're going to get kind of beat up and slowed down. So we're trying to get the best flow, the smoothest flow for our air across our surface, essentially.
Nice.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to bring in a comment here. We're going to get rid of Phil's screen. Phil screen. Twilight Zone.
All
right. So William brought in a comment here. He wants to talk a little about frost. So if we had frost on our wing, what kind of drag are we going to create? What do we think, Phil?
I'm thinking you got a combination of form for sure, just because you've got a super gnarly leading edge, that this thing is building up on. And it's the ultimate macroscopic side, example of skin imperfections as well. I would think it'd be the combination of the two,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think on a bigger scale, as the frost builds up, it's building a crappier form that's creating this issue. But on a smaller scale, if it's little just droplets or something that are actually attached to the surface, then we could actually be having a crappier. Well, in fact, now thinking about it, I wonder what is better for your skin friction, maybe a smooth, like, could a smoother of ice improve your skin friction drag? I wonder.
I don't know, because it's an interesting thought. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I mean, with frost specifically, you think about the surface area. When I think about skin and skin friction, I think about surface area. And frost is going to have a ton of that, like rime ice and things like that just do not feel good. If it doesn't feel good, it's probably not going to fly through the air real well. But I don't know about the ice. I think ice might be another classic example of something that feels smooth but actually is rough. Like in terms of a wing. I don't know. But what I do know,
that'd be an interesting.
Yeah, like I know, in accident reports that I've read, and that I, accidents that I've heard about on TV on air disasters on the Smithsonian Channel. It's this program that documents aircraft crashes and what the NTSB has learned from it. There have been a couple of there that have resulted from ice, and what they've shown is that. And this is in the handbook, like in the different pilot handbooks that you can see too, is like it doesn't take much for half of the wing, for the wing to be reduced to like half or a third of its lifting efficiency. Something like, depending on the wing itself, obviously, and the speed of the airplane, but something like the thickness of some sandpaper full of ice, I mean, could reduce the wing's efficiency like dramatically, which I was shocked by. But it really doesn't take that much. So something's happening there, I would think, with the skin at least.
Yeah, that would be an interesting little experiment to go down. I certainly don't have the materials to do that kind of experiment, especially in 90-degree weather in California. So cool.
Yeah.
Then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Feel free to leave some comments. Anybody who's on right now, we can talk a little bit longer if you guys have something you want to dive into. But next time we'll be doing a little bit more drag discussion. We're going to talk about one of the other drags. I haven't decided yet. Probably induced. We'll talk about induced drag.
No, it's gonna be a fun discussion, you know.
Just trying to drag
pilots. It's yeah, it's gonna be good.
Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Phil for coming and helping us out with all the technical information, because I just draw like a child, so I had somebody to zoom in on hairs and stuff.
Thank you, Google. No, thanks for having me on.
Right,
and
cool.
yeah, I appreciate your guys' participation, dude. I'm looking forward to next time, man.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.